Welcome to Ashley On, your one-stop podcast where we talk about health and wellness, spirituality, and all things new. Stick around as we delve deep into innovations to support a better world.
Hello and welcome to the show. Today we're talking to Greg Dean from the Hemp Plastics Company. Greg is a 30-year veteran of the packaging industry and one of the leaders and principals involved in the Hemp Plastics Company. Really excited about the work he's doing. We talk a lot about their work with different industries and the automotive industry in particular, as well as the packaging industry. We talk about some of the details around how they are working to green up plastics and make an impact, and by fitting into the system and into the process, as opposed to trying to really completely change the process, which obviously takes longer. So it's a great informative episode. If you're interested in hemp plastics and the environment and the impact that hemp can have, then I think you'll really enjoy this show. Thanks very much.
Hey guys, as always, this episode is brought to you by Packed with Life Tea. You know, I always talk about how much I love iced tea, and Packed with Life tastes fantastic. And I don't add any sweetener or anything like that. Just great tasting iced tea, packed with organic adaptogens, including the 4 key mushrooms: lion's mane, chaga, cordyceps, and reishi. Of course, it tastes great as hot tea as well, if that's your thing. And some people like to add a little bit of honey. But either way, no matter how you like your tea, you're going to love this tea, and it will boost your immune system, brain, lungs, and gut. That's why it's Packed with Life. So get yours today at packedwithlife.com. Have a great day.
Hello, Greg. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Greg Dean with the Chief Commercial and Operations Officer at the Hemp Plastics Company. Did I get that right, Greg?
You did? Yep.
Awesome. And a 30-year veteran of the packaging industry. Any other credentials that I should share in terms of?
No, I've been working with materials since the late 80s. Worked 10 years in the metal packaging side of things, and then made the jump over to the evil enemy, plastics, after fighting against it for 10 years. So, and the last 20 plus have been in that space.
Now you're trying to clean that up, huh?
Well, trying to atone for sins, I think, right?
Isn't that the truth? That's what many of us are doing, I think. Yeah, I won't go into mine.
Yeah, exactly.
So, let's talk about, the Hemp Plastics Company, what great branding. So pretty clear what you guys are trying to do, just right there. So congratulations to whoever came up with your company name and the brand. I think you've done a fantastic job there. Right down the middle.
URL has been very helpful to own that in the space, because it does help center people in on, our product line first, which is good. So, tell our audience about the Hemp Plastics Company. I mean, we can get into details, but, just give us the overview to start with, and sure,
what you guys are doing and what you're all about. And then we can kind of go into more under the hood types of.
Absolutely. So the concept of the company, which preceded my involvement with it, I think was basically a dovetail of 2 pretty important cultural phenomena that were happening at the time, one of which was the legalization of hemp and hemp-like products, which created, as you know very well, the explosion in the CBD world. And everybody in there, was attempting to grow hemp for medicinal purposes. And so you had the crash and burn cycle there. But during that time, what happened in the United States is a very, very large new industrial agricultural crop was brought to bear, and there was only a certain amount of that plant that was really usable, and that was the top 6 inches of the flower, and the rest of the plant, at the time, as useful as we all knew historically hemp was not being given a lot of thought to. So that was kind of the thought process, that in conjunction with the national sword policy in China, which was basically, and not a lot of your listeners probably know this, but until that policy was implemented in 2018, China took 40% of all plastic scrap from the United States. So we would ship everything offshore that we didn't either dispose of, and they got to the point where they said, listen, we can't, take any more of this. And so that created a lot of buildup of plastic waste and pollution, which fell into the ocean. And hence you had, the great Texas-sized blob of plastic that's slowly migrating its way over from the Pacific. So those two pretty sizable events said, listen, there's a solution here. There's a stopgap for sure. Whether we can solve it or not sure. And so the concept was, how can we combine that material, that hemp material in some form or fashion, together with conventional plastics and replace a significant portion of those plastics with the hemp material. And that's what our standard formulation is. So primarily we work with conventional resins, some of which are compostable like PLA and PHA. Others are traditional, fossil fuel based resins like polypropylene, high density polyethylene, ABS. And we displace 25% of that material with 25% hemp. So we are filling that material with a bio-based filler as opposed to other traditional mineral fillers like glass, calcium carbonate, talc. Those are all traditional fillers. And the concept of replacing or filling plastics is nothing new. It's been going on for years and years in a lot of industries, most prevalently the automotive industry. So I always like to provide a visual for people. If you rail cars of resin are very common. If you've ever seen a train go by, I guarantee you half that train is pulling resin.
Yeah.
And so if you can eliminate 1 out of every 4 of those by using a substitute material without sacrificing performance, there's value there from those that really want to take the angle on environmental wherewithal and motivation for them to look at the materials. The other thing about hemp waste, as you probably know, is that, most agricultural waste in this country goes into animal feed. Animal feed, is very easy to process, and animals, they like to sleep on hemp, but they don't like to eat it too much. So that said, hey, listen, we're going to have a agricultural reality in this country. How can we play our part in doing it? And so, we can take up to about 10 million pounds of that hemp material, whether it's grown specifically for our use in plastics, or if it is a byproduct of another, hemp protein food type product, CBD, one of those elements. And then we combine that in. And the nice thing about our filler, Ashley, is that unlike minerals that are taken from the ground, calcium carbonate or talc, our filler replenishes itself every year. It grows a new cycle. And so we're not actually stripping anything out of the land. We're using something that's top harvested and using that as our filler. So it's exciting. And it's been a challenge over the past couple of years, not just because of the COVID epidemic, but also because, we've had some very, very significant headwinds in regard to force majeure with plastic and resin availability due to some global conditions and then some local U.S. conditions that happened in Texas last year that were weather related. So, but we're plowing ahead. We've commercialized 5 recipes right now that have been commercially utilized in injection molded applications. We're beginning to work with sheet extrusion and actual blow extrusion, which was my forte in my previous life. And so we're just now really getting to expand. The great thing about what our products are is, although you rightly mentioned, I come out of the packaging field. Packaging is just one of the verticals that we participate in. I live in Michigan, right outside of Detroit, and the amount of interest from the automotive sector is incredible. And that's not surprising, because it was Henry Ford who kind of started the whole concept of hemp cars back in the 40s. When he built his all hemp car. So we're not limited to packaging as an option, although, the focus on the reduction of single-use plastics is a high priority and largely entwined in that cultural discussion we had a few minutes ago. So I'll take a breath here and let you jump in.
Oh, it's great. Thank you. I was taking notes. I've got many questions for you. So, in fairness, is it fair to say that you guys are greening up then the plastic industry? Maybe not completely cleaning it up all the way yet, but you're greening it up with a 25% contribution that's not petroleum based, and is therefore is also sucking carbon out of the air because we're growing it.
Right. So the nice thing about hemp as a filler is it's one of nature's greatest carbon sequestering plants. And so we get that value. And that's one of the things that the entire value chain in the hemp space is really working on right now. We're all working on it. You're working on it. I'm working on it. What we know is there's carbon credit value there. We're just trying to figure out now how to split it. How much goes to the farmer and the grower, how much goes to the distributor, how much goes to the repurposer, a company that wants to mill and dry material and maybe send it into the plastic space and the hempwood space and the paper space and all of those things. So that's one of the key elements of the thought process that goes into everything.
Yeah, and just to give a little background around what Greg was sharing there, many listeners may not be aware that when you grow hemp, the plant itself, every 1 ton of it that's processed is absorbing somewhere between 1.5 to 2.3 tons of CO2 from the air as it's grown. And so that's a radically different environmental value proposition than pumping oil out of the ground and burning it to create plastic, right? I mean, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, and I hate the concept of greenwashing that's out there, and unfortunately, I see a lot of people in our space, in the engineered resin space, that are making a lot of claims that quite honestly aren't realistic, and we don't want to do that. We're not in the greenwashing business. We're nothing but forthright in how we do things. But what I think we can be is a great stopgap from going from 100% virgin materials, all fossil fuel derived, to the ultimate end game, which I would like to see us, achieve in the next 5 to 6 years, is polymerization of hemp. You can turn hemp into a plastic itself. The challenge is it's getting the manufacturing capability of doing that. We call these resin manufacturing locations crackers. And a new cracker facility is about a $500 million proposition to just get one off the ground at probably 50 million pound capacity. So in order to scale, that's going to take a Herculean effort from the industry. But we don't have to get there today, right? You don't have to go from 0 to 60 right out of the block. So incrementally improve your footprint. And we're a great way for people to incrementally improve their footprint from going from just a virgin material. And you say, well, what about recycled content? Great. I love using recycled content. It's as good as using, any other natural filler to replace that plastic. Unfortunately, there's not enough of it available for everybody who wants to participate in the recycle game. So, I spent a career working with all the tier 1 companies, the CPGs, the largest global brands. And those are not the target audience for our products at this point in time, because those companies are very smart and they tie up the capacity of post-consumer recycled materials. They tie up the scalable biomaterials like PLA. They get the contracts in place. The folks that we really have the most interest from are that tier 2 and tier 3 layer that says, listen, we still move our products into the same distribution channels that the Cokes and the Pepsis and the Kraft Foods of the world do. And you guess what? The retail trade is asking us to do the same thing they're asking them to do. But guys, we don't have a means to do that. We've lightweighted products over the years to the point where we can't lightweight them anymore. So source reduction is off the table. We've looked for every potential source of post-consumer recycled or post-industrial recycled material. And unfortunately, that's a finite amount that's highly contracted and highly overutilized as an industry. And so that leaves you, very few options, but you're still getting asked those same questions from, the big chains. The Walmarts are going to everybody, whether you're Coca-Cola or your Jim's soda from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And they're being asked the same thing. Listen, you need to reduce materials. We need to go to net zero on all of our garbage and trash at store locations. So they're getting tasked with all of those things. And so I think we provide a nice outlet to allow them to make step changes in the direction of reducing dependence on just virgin resins.
Yeah, that's great context. So to be clear, you can use recycled plastic in your process, but it's just not available.
Yeah, we actually, I use some post-industrial recycled material, polypropylene, that we blend, but there is no infrastructure for polypropylene reclamation in the U.S. So in the United States, I'll digress into recycling for a little bit. In the United States, there are only two infrastructures set up in the plastic realm to collect, reprocess, and recycle materials. That is high density polyethylene and PET. So PET, think about your soda bottles, your water bottles. Those two materials are specifically called out and have infrastructure set up nationally to collect, sort, and manage the recycling process. And even though those infrastructures exist, guess how much a year of those materials we recycle? About 25% for PET and probably about 30% for high density. So even when you put this, I live in Michigan, we have the big green barrels that we put all of our plastic in. And when that plastic leaves and goes to the MRF, the municipal recycling facility, they pluck out the polypropylene, they pluck out the other materials that aren't recyclable. That stuff ends up often in the landfill because there is no reprocessing for it. So think about that end of life scenario. Even in that end of life scenario, you're putting a bottle or a package or an item or a widget into the landfill that's now composed of 25% hemp. That's still, by the way, sequestering carbon. So as that natural decomposition process happens, and I know people like to think plastics live for thousands of years. Not true. Plastics, wood, paper, in a landfill, they all break down about the exact same phase. So that's another benefit for us to say, listen, let's play the subtraction game until we get to the polymerization effort, where then we could say, hey, this is a plastic made truly of 100% hemp. And I think that'll come, but that's not a 1 to 3 year possibility in reality.
Yeah, understood. So the you mentioned the PLA and the PHA, complementary ingredients that you use in some of your plastics as being compostable, right? So is that when those products, then when you add the hemp and make those, are they fully compostable?
Yeah, but there's two types of compostability, and those materials function in two different ways. So PLA is polylactic acid, and that is a material that biodegrades only under commercial composting conditions. So in other words, it has to go to a facility. You can't throw this in your compost pile in the backyard. It has to go to a facility where it can be subjected to 170-degree temperature at a certain barometric pressure and moisture level. And that activates the decomposition of it, which is fine, but there's a limited amount of those commercial composting facilities out there. So again, trying to get those materials back. And if I set a PET bottle and a PLA bottle in front of you, unless you're pretty trained, it's going to be very hard for you to tell those apart. So how is the guy who's making $10 an hour sorting garbage at a MRF going to know this one's PLA and this one's PET? So that's the digging into it. So that is the one type. And then the other type is PHA. And PHA is a material developed by Danimer Scientific. The first commercial reactor was just opened in Kentucky about 1.5 years ago. And that is a material that does conventionally compost. So that is the material that if you do throw it out into material, it will have the ability to naturally compost without having to go to a commercial compost facility. The challenge with that material is right now, I believe there's less than 40 million pounds of capacity of that material available. And I think the big guys have chewed up a pretty big block of that material. So you have to be careful with the biodegradable materials, because oftentimes, I can remember when PLA first came out in 2001, I worked with Cargill on the material when it first came out. I made the first rigid bottles with it. They looked exactly like PET bottles. But at the time, we were trying to work with them on the messaging. And if you did the math and you looked at the calculation of energy consumed versus energy consumed and oil utilized in production of resin, you actually had a worse environmental footprint with the PLA, because the cost of growing and harvesting the corn, then you have to convert the corn to lactic acid in the first process. Then you have to convert it to polylactic acid, which is the resin phase. Those are highly energy consuming processes. So that's the challenge, is making sure that people know what they're asking for when they talk about these materials. So again, that's why I'm an open book about these. I am material agnostic. I am not a proponent of one or the other unless it's a material that I know will work better in your particular application, and then I'm obviously going to work with you on that.
Right. Okay. So changing gears a little bit, let's talk about what, hemp is a broad subject, right? So you've got the hemp seeds, which can be broken down into hemp oil and hemp cake, and you've got the hulls, you've got
Protein powder.
you got the stalk, you got the CBD flower. What exactly are you utilizing from the hemp plant when you guys are, sourcing materials to make hemp plastics?
So we have the ability to use pretty much any part of the plant we can. And there are two critical things that we do need, and you and I have talked about this 100 times. That is particle size and moisture level. The key for successful compounding is being able to ingratiate the particles of hemp successfully and compatibly with the polymer molecules. So we need to have a particle size that works through all the screens and systems that we use. And then moisture is the enemy of plastics. Anybody in the plastic space will tell you that. So keeping the material dry, and hemp, as great a carbon sequester it is, it's one of the most hygroscopic plants out there as well. So it's, even when we get it in small 150 to 250 micron size particles, those particles are actively searching for ambient moisture. And so keeping the material as dry as possible is critical for us. But we can use and have used crushed seed hulls. We've used exterior stock. We've done a lot of work and are beginning to work more with hurd. It provides a little bit of a lighter color and seems to be maybe potential use in more extrusion applications. It's a little bit of a softer feel. But literally, we can use anything as long as it's milled and dried successfully. And that's the key to our business. And of all of the subsequent tangential industries you can get off the hemp plant, hempcrete, hemp wood, hemp paper, hemp cloth, we have probably some of the more stringent requirements, just because we're really trying to work with micronized materials and do them successfully.
So you could use the hemp seeds, then you're saying you could use that?
We have used them. The only challenge that we found with hemp seeds is, even though you crush them and dry them, there's a bit of residual oil no matter how hard you press those seeds. And when you go in the compound phase, you accelerate heat, so you create some heat blooms, and you can get a little bit more oil release with the seed. So if we use them, I would have it mixed in with other waste material, not just doing a full just crack seeds would probably be a little bit more challenging than we'd want to work with.
Yeah. So what can you tell us? I mean, I'm imagining a lot of the stuff that you're working on is under wraps with some of these companies, but what can you tell us about any customers or clients that you're working with that, that our listeners may have heard of or know, brands? Is there any big guys that you're working with or up and comings that you're excited about?
Yeah, there's a couple. I can't name names, but you can intuit that I'm working with the major OEMs in the automotive space right now.
Okay.
And so all of those in some form or fashion, including, we've got inquiries from some of the electric vehicle companies, because they're wanting to integrate this even into, interior visible parts. And that way they can say, listen, look at our environmentally friendly car that runs on electricity. We're even using hemp plastic on the fascia, or things of that. So there's a lot of look from the automotive space right now that's natural. Packaging, it's more of the mid-level molders, the Plastifacts of the world, my own company, and that they're so geared towards high speed, high output, high cavitation production that really to get new materials qualified in there is always a challenge. So we're working with, some of the lower levels. We're working with a major US restaurant chain right now, who's going to introduce sheet material. We're making hemp plastic sheeting now, which is anywhere from a 1/4 inch thick to 3/4 inch thick, used in the building and architectural space. We're working with a major apparel company from the West Coast in shoe utilization, where we've got companies that are interested in how can you incorporate TPUs, and I could do blending with TPUs at a certain hardness level. that works with hemp. You get just too soft of a material, and it's very hard to ingratiate the hemp into it. So, and if I could name names of all of those different sectors I just told you, you'd recognize every single one of them. And someday we will, but we've obviously got, the thing about emerging engineered resin technology is it's very, very protected, not so much even by the manufacturer, but by the people using it. So when a company is using this material, they want to have a really clean understanding before it gets out into the trade. Hey, we're working with this new material. And I understand that. And so, at some point we'll as these things roll into commercialization, the idea is we'll, do the appropriate press follow-up and releasing that with those. And they've been great partners, and they realize we're a startup. They realize we're a small company, and I think they appreciate the how far we've been able to come in such a short time, and getting to where we are now at commercial scalable levels.
That's great. Well, Greg, thank you for being on the show. Is there any last words you'd like to share? Anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
No, you did a great job. Hopefully, the folks have a little bit better, understanding of what we do, and we're always looking for opportunities and applications and pushing the envelope. And if this prompts any questions or inquiries, always glad to have a discussion. Like you said at the beginning, I'm a 30-year plastics guy, so that I'm a plastics guy before I'm a hemp guy, but I've quickly become a hemp plastic guy. So
yeah, well, good deal. I'm happy for you. I'm glad Hemp Plastic Company is making an impact, and I look forward to working with you over the next few years to help make more of an impact.
That's great. I really appreciate you having me on the show, Ashley.
Take care, Greg. Have a good day.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Ashley on Nothing But the Truth for a Better You and Me.